You're listening to Heart of the Ark podcast from the Office for Evangelization in the Archdiocese of Newark. We're coming to you to bring knowledge and some courage as we voyage through this life as missionary disciples of our Lord Jesus Christ. Hello and welcome to Dilexit Nos in a Year from the Heart of the Ark podcast from the Office for Evangelization here at the Archdiocese of Newark. My name is Jennifer Benke. This is session 14, Pope Francis's Dilexit Nos in a Year. We will be starting with chapter 3, paragraphs 52 through 58. But first, we pray. Love of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, embrace my heart. Fire of the heart of Jesus, inflame my heart. Charity of the heart of Jesus, fill my heart. Strength of the heart of Jesus, sustain my heart. Mercy of the heart of Jesus, pardon my heart. Patience of the heart of Jesus, do not forsake my heart. Reign of the heart of Jesus, establish yourself in my heart. Wisdom of the heart of Jesus, teach my heart. Will of the heart of Jesus, guide my heart. Zeal of the heart of Jesus, consume my heart. Jesus, make our hearts more like your own. Chapter 3, paragraph 52 through 58, Venerating His Image. While the image of Christ in his heart is not in itself an object of worship, neither is it simply one among many other possible images. It was not devised at a desk or designed by an artist. It is no imaginary symbol, but a real symbol which represents the center, the source from which salvation flowed for all humanity. Universal human experience has made the image of the heart something unique. Indeed, throughout history and in the parts of the world, it has become a symbol of personal intimacy, affection, emotional attachment, and the capacity for love. Transcending all scientific explanations, a hand placed on the heart of a friend expresses special affection. When two persons fall in love and draw close to one another, their hearts beat faster. When we are abandoned or deceived by someone we love, our hearts sink. So too, when we want to say something deeply personal, we often say that we are speaking from the heart. The language of poetry reflects the power of these experiences. In the course of history, the heart has taken on unique symbolic value that is more than merely conventional. It is understandable, then, that the Church has chosen the image of the heart to represent the human and divine love of Jesus Christ and the inmost core of his person. Yet, while the depiction of a heart of fire may be an eloquent symbol of the burning love of Jesus Christ, it is important that this heart not be represented apart from him. In this way, his summons to a personal relationship of encounter and dialogue will become all the more meaningful. The venerable image portraying Christ holding out his loving heart also shows him looking directly at us, inviting us to encounter, dialogue, and trust. It shows his strong hands capable of supporting us and his lips that speak personally to each of us. The heart, too, has the advantage of being immediately recognizable as the profound unifying center of the body, an expression of the totality of the person, unlike other individual organs. As a part that stands for the whole, we could easily misinterpret it, were we to contemplate it apart from the Lord himself. The image of the heart should lead us to contemplate Christ in all the beauty and richness of his humanity and divinity. Whatever particular aesthetic qualities we may ascribe to various portrayals of Christ's heart when we pray before them, it is not the case that something is sought from them or that blind trust is put in images as once was done by the Gentiles. Rather, through these images that we kiss and before which we kneel and uncover our heads, we are adoring Christ. Certain of these representations may indeed strike us as tasteless and not particularly conducive to affection of prayer. Yet this is of little importance, since they are only invitations to prayer. And to cite an Eastern proverb, we should not limit our gaze to the finger that points us to the moon. Whereas the Eucharist is the real presence to be worshipped, sacred images, albeit blessed, point beyond themselves. inviting us to lift up our hearts and to unite them to the heart of the living Christ. The image we venerate thus serves as a summons to make room for an encounter with Christ and to worship him in whatever way we wish to picture him. Standing before the image, we stand before Christ, and in his presence, love pauses, contemplates mystery, and enjoys it in silence. At the same time, we must never forget that the image of the heart speaks to us of the flesh and earthly realities. In this way, it points us to the God who wished to become one of us, a part of our history and a companion on our earthly journey. A more abstract or stylized form of devotion would not necessarily be more faithful to the gospel, for in this eloquent and tangible sign, we see how God willed to reveal himself and to draw close to us. Okay, so as we've done in the past, we're going to look at the 3 footnotes from this section. And the first one brings us to a decree from the Congregation of Sacred Ritual from 1879. And what it says is, we can thus understand why the Church has forbidden placing on the altar representations of the heart of Jesus or Mary alone. Outside the liturgy, for private devotion, the symbolism of a heart can be used as teaching aid and aesthetic figure, or an emblem that invites one to meditate on the love of Christ. But this risks taking the heart as an object of adoration or spiritual dialogue apart from the person of Christ. That was written on the 31st of March, 1887. It's been for 100 years, from back in Pope Leo XIII's reign. This has been the purpose of the understanding of the Sacred Heart. You can't take it apart in the context of the Mass and just have the heart apart from Jesus, his eyes, his face, his hands. It has to be a representation of the whole thing in the church. Now, you could have a Sacred Heart in your home. I know that when I was helping clean out a convent, every sister's cell had a small little emblem of the Sacred Heart up by every door. And my family has the symbols of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, Immaculate Heart of Mary, and the Blessed Heart of St. Joseph in both our living room and our dining room, 2 different depictions of those. And they bring us a devotional quality of the family, right? And that's something that we can look to as a representation of it. It takes the love of the mom, it takes the love of the children, it takes the love of the father and stepfather in the house to make it a unified whole. And that's particularly poignant symbol to my family, but we don't adore that symbol. We don't worship that symbol. Sacred art that points us towards and points our prayers and points our home life towards the Holy Family, not in any way taking away from the worship that we give the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist at the altar. So the other document that is footnoted here is from the Council of Trent, right? So that goes all the way back to the 16th century, and it tells us that the Council of Trent was the one that helped us reform some of the private devotions of the church and some of the ways in which we engaged with private devotions or community worship that really took us away from the importance of the sacrament of the Eucharist, the Blessed Sacrament. And it was part of the understanding of the Counter-Reformation, right? The Reformation that birthed the Protestant religions. The Catholic Church did not say, well, fine, go your own way, right? They said, maybe some of these critiques are important for us to absorb as a Catholic Church. Maybe we do take things too far and allow for devotions to pull us away from the true. And so maybe we should reform some of the ways we do. And then that's what's called the Counter-Reformation. 1500s, that's where this quote, Article 56, comes out. It is not the case that something is sought from them or that blind trust is put in images as once was done by the Gentiles. Rather, through these images that we kiss and before which we kneel and uncover our heads, we are adoring Christ. And that is really important for the understanding, when we talk about, well, do Catholics worship Mary? No, we don't worship Mary. We worship Jesus Christ. To Mary is a special honor, a special hyperdulia. It's a special honor of intercession, of going to her as the mother of Christ, as recognizing her place as the first of believers, and asking, when we ask her intercession in a special way, it kind of supersedes all the other saints that we have in heaven. Mary always points us to Jesus. That's the best part of having a relationship with the Blessed Mother, is that she always wants us to know her Son. She's always showing us. All depictions of the Blessed Mother show us her Son, even if she's pregnant, or if there's that understanding that she is always bringing us closer to her Son. And in the same way, we have to be careful with the ways that we celebrate saints, or what the private devotions or the practices that we take up, to make sure that we're not putting anything in the place of Jesus. I think we spoke about this on a former episode, when I mentioned at one point, I was asked if I wanted to do a consecration to St. Joseph. And I love St. Joseph, but I wouldn't consecrate myself to St. Joseph, because I am consecrated to Christ. I'm consecrated to Christ. In a special way, there are times when I have felt drawn to consecrate myself to his Blessed Mother, but that is to know Christ better. That is to know his depth of love outpoured to me, and sometimes given an example in the ways in which the Blessed Mother has loved him in her life. Because as a mother, that maternity, that spirituality of maternal example is important to me as an access to understand Christ better, right? Rather than having a devotion to a particular saint that might make us solely focused on what that saint does for us, and almost to the exclusion that all things come from the goodness of God poured out in the person of Jesus Christ. All things. So we just have to be really careful. And I think that Pope Francis is making sure that even in this new age, in this 21st century, that we're abiding by the right order of worship, right? So we can worship Christ. We can venerate his image. But we know that we don't, even in an image, it's not worship. Worship is only due to the Blessed Sacrament because of all that it represents, the faith life of a Catholic. St. Augustine, from his Confessions, is famously known as saying that, to paraphrase, every person has a God-sized hole in his heart. As in, we are specifically made for relationship in our heart with the one being, that the only thing that can fill that hole up, and that is a relationship with God. And a lot of people put a lot of different things in that hole. They put a different relationship, a human relationship. They put a work or a vocation. They put a addiction, unfortunately, or other things get put in that hole in order to fill that inherent longing of every human heart for union with the divine, but only an understanding of union with the divine and how to build a relationship and walk a pathway closer to the heart is what really gives us fulfillment in life. Okay, so this is the letter of Benedict XVI from 2007 to the end of it's the Aparecida document. So it's the end of the 5th conference of the Latin American and Caribbean bishops, okay? It's similar to what we just read from the Council of Trent. So it says, among the expressions of this spirituality are patron saint celebrations, novenas, rosaries, the way of the cross, processions, dances, and songs of religious folklore, affection for the saints and angels, solemn promises, promises, and family prayer. We highlight pilgrimages where the people of God can be recognized in their journey. There, the believer celebrates the joy of feeling surrounded by a myriad of brothers and sisters journeying together toward God who awaits them. Christ himself becomes pilgrim and walks arisen among the poor. The decision to set out toward the shrine is already a confession of faith. Walking is a true song of hope, and arrival is the encounter of love. The pilgrim's gaze rests on the image that symbolizes God's affection and closeness. Love pauses, contemplates mystery, and enjoys it in silence. It is also moved, pouring out the full load of its pain and its dreams. The confident prayer, flowing sincerely, is the best expression of a heart that has relinquished self-sufficiency, recognizing that alone it can do nothing. A living spiritual experience is compressed into a brief moment. So it's in this section called Popular Piety as Space of Encounter with Jesus Christ from this document to Latin America. And it's just understanding the place which we rightly orient popular piety and these devotions, and making sure that everything, even the practice of a pilgrimage to a shrine, even the carrying of a statue through the streets of a town, everything orients us back to Christ. We just have to make sure that that is rightly ordered back, to understand that that is never, ever to supersede building the relationship with Jesus Christ. I just want to go back to this idea, and I'm certain we'll touch on it at the next one, but I'm going to ask some questions. If we're thinking about St. Augustine, what is it that we put in that hole, that God-sized hole that gets us off track? What is it? For me, often it's my kids. I put my kids in front of everything else, and that's part of my vocation as a mom, and I know that. But at the same time, to the detriment of my relationship with God, to the detriment of my relationship with my husband, to the detriment of my relationship with my work, it can be difficult. Is that rightly ordered? Is my devotion to my children correctly ordered? I have to pray about that. That's something I go and speak to my confessor about often. I think that's a really difficult thing to manage in this world, especially as working parents, because there's so much fear of not doing all that we could because we're away from our kids for so long. I think that there are times when I put my work in front of everything else. Are there times when I put practices that I engage in that are just meant to distract in places where faith could go, in deepening my relationship? Do I spend too much time on my phone when I could be reading something that would draw me closer to Jesus, or praying, or sitting in silence, or being still, or meditating? What are the things that I put in place in my life, in the place that should be rightly ordered to worship of God and to building a relationship with Him? Okay, so I'm going to close here with a portion of St. Augustine's Confessions. This is right in the beginning of Book 1. It's the 5th paragraph in Book 1. Oh, that I might repose on thee. Oh, that thou wouldst enter into my heart and inebriate it, that I may forget my ills and embrace thee, my sole good. What art thou to me? In thy pity teach me to utter it. Or what am I to thee, that thou demandest my love, and, if I give it not, art wroth with me, and threatenest me with grievous woes? Is it then a slight woe to love thee not? Oh, for thy mercy's sake, tell me, O Lord my God, what thou art unto me. Say unto my soul, I am thy salvation. So speak that I may hear. Behold, Lord, my heart is before thee. Open thou the ears thereof, and say unto my soul, I am thy salvation. After this voice let me haste and take hold on thee. Hide not thy face from me. Let me die, lest I die. Only let me see thy face. Heart of the Ark podcast is an initiative by the Office for Evangelization at the Archdiocese of Newark. If you want to find us online, you can find us at rcan.org/evangelization. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. Very soon we'll be updating our social media for the Heart of the Ark, but you can find us on Fireside Podcasts at heartoftheark.fireside.fm. Our theme song is composed by and orchestrated by Eric Hunter, a dear friend of mine. You can find out more about Eric and his performances and compositions at Eric, E-R-I-C, Hunter, H-U-N-T-E-R, music.com. This has been a pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from you and speaking with you in the future.